ball since I saw him on Friday.
Dan is the ultimate multitasker, launching his company today officially and doing a podcast at the same time.
Multi-skilled.
Well, a good thing to start recording so we could get that on audio. So this is historic. This is a milestone, man. 1 year from now, when you're IPOing for the quickest IPO in history, we'll be listening to this podcast. Feel like this is when it happened.
I love your optimism.
It's naive optimism. Let's be precise here. All right. Starting the show. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? You're listening to, what episode are we on, guys? Is this 11?
I think it's 11.
I believe this. We'll check the notes later, but I believe we're on episode 11 of the podcast. It's already April. This is our first episode of Q2. So congrats to everyone who's making those payment checks right now to the IRS. Like I unfortunately had to do last week. Sucks. But nonetheless, it's the cost of doing business, right? You're listening to episode 11 of the podcast, brought to you by Chop Dog. Dog is in DAWG. You already know what we do. We build mobile apps. We build web apps. We help companies launch. We help enterprises. Contact us, free proposal. You'll talk to Eddie one-on-one. I'll jump in eventually and save the day. But you guys get the idea. But nonetheless, I am pumped for this episode. A good friend of mine, Mr. Brad. Brad, what is happening, man? How are you?
Everything's happening. Thanks for having me on the show, guys. How you guys doing?
Very good. Very good.
Fantastic.
I'm absolutely loving the Philly vibe in the show right away. We have a Northeast Philly, well, not Northeast, like Northern Liberties Philly and South Philly being represented here. Are you? It is South Philly, right? It's not like Washington Square part of Philly, because that's its own section, right?
It's not Washington Square. I think of it as South Philly. I think people prefer to call it Queen Village because the people in South Philly say you're not really South Philly.
Yeah, it depends how authentic Italian are you. That's how you know if you're in South Philly or not.
Exactly.
So Queen Village, listen, your area is awesome. I am completely envious. So that's awesome. But nonetheless, Brad, for those who have no context of you whatsoever, they're on here right now. They're like, who the hell is Brad? Give them like your best 60-second overview, and then we'll kind of go in more detail throughout the show.
All right. So I'm a dad. I got a 6-year-old son, great wife. We live in South Philly or Queen Village, depending on who you ask. I invest in startup tech companies, specifically marketing technology companies. I teach entrepreneurship to older teenagers, which is super fun and exciting. And I'm deeply involved with a lot of different youth nonprofits. I love working with kids. And I also write. Writing is my passion. So as often as I can, I try to write stuff that people will enjoy.
I love it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go right back to the very, very beginning. So let's talk about your childhood a little bit. Yeah, we're going there. We're going all the way back. We're going to work our way up. So
is this a therapy session? Do I have to pay for this?
It's included. It's included the cost of podcasting.
This is about your father and mother.
So tell us how you really feel, Brad. So let's go a little bit where are you from and how did you first become what do you think was your first signs of becoming an entrepreneur? I might want to work for myself or do something on my own versus maybe I'm not this traditional path that a lot of people around me are doing.
So I grew up in Northern Jersey and I was always Northern Jersey's awesome. And I was always selling stuff. So I was entrepreneurial from a young age. We lived a block away from the baseball field. I used to brew up iced tea in my house, take it out in pitchers, and sell it to people in the stands for $0.25 a cup. When I went to overnight camp, kids weren't allowed to have sodas. So at night, my bunkmates would pay me, and I would sneak up past all the counselors who are on overnight duty to the Coke machine, get Cokes, bring it back. That business lasted a total of 3 days before I got busted and had to sit outside in my underwear with shaving cream in my hand, so I couldn't scratch myself as the bugs would be biting. But I've always been entrepreneurial, shoveling driveways, doing yard work, whatever I could, because I just love selling and coming up with ideas and trying to make things happen. Then in college, I started a student directory business. So of course, I was in college before the internet was widespread, and people still use paper directories. Exactly.
What is paper? I don't know that word.
Use it to start fires. And legitimate fires in your fireplace. And we did student directories for 17 schools or so. And then I started dabbling in the internet when the internet came along. And that's how I wound up becoming an internet entrepreneur.
So one of my big questions for you right off the bat, would you consider yourself first an entrepreneur or a salesperson? in the heart first? Like the first thing that would come into your core?
Entrepreneur. Because I solve problems. Like that's what I love doing, is figuring out what's going to make something better. What's a solution? Here's an idea. But I think I love sales because when you're selling, you're helping someone solve that problem, whether it's what you have, or sometimes in the sales process, you discover that a client would be much better off with someone else, and then you just send them somewhere else, but you're still solving their problem, which is very satisfying.
It's definitely, I definitely also agree that like sales and entrepreneurship aren't mutually exclusive either. A lot of times the best entrepreneurs are the best salespeople or the best entertainers, right? I really think almost the art of entrepreneurship in today's age is you got to be able to tell a great story, and you have to relate to an audience like emotionally, right? I think if you look at you're solving a problem, you're probably emotionally attached to that problem, so you can get to the emotional layer of the people you're trying to solve that problem for.
Right.
So 100% believe in that. So let's talk a little bit. So you're kind of talking about your first entrepreneurial ventures. Let's talk about your first like actual legitimate, I'm an entrepreneur creating a business venture, like outside of like selling Coke and things of that nature, not like Coca-Cola. So first, like,
Thank you.
I hear for kids, you know.
For those listening, for context is always key. No, you gotta admit, I think we had a previous podcast. We're talking about, if you really think about drug dealers, you could make the argument they're authentic entrepreneurs on the surface. You know, they're illegal, but they're it's a thing.
Subjectivity and context, right?
It is all about context and how you spend it. But let's go back into it. The reality is, let's talk about your first true venture. Like, what was it, and how did you get into it? Right? Like, how did it start? How did the problem come out where you're like, I'm going to solve this better than anybody else is going to solve this?
So my first venture that I'd say is a true entrepreneurial venture was in college. I worked for the school newspaper, and we would go take the newspaper to be printed, and I would wait for it. And when the newspaper was coming off the press, I went to Haverford College in the suburbs. I saw that the same printer printed the newspaper for Villanova and St. Joe's and Harcum and Rosemont and all the local schools. And the same advertisers advertised in every newspaper. And I started doing the math. And with all these advertisements, advertisers were paying a ton of money to be in 5 or 6 newspapers, which was a throwaway. And I had thought, well, if I did a student directory that we gave out first day of school, and it was nice, it had a full color cover, it was thick, you know, with a nice binding, had coupons in it, we could charge a good fee to advertisers. They'd reach all the schools in a much nicer format that would be kept all year. So I convinced my roommate to jettison his internship at a law firm. And we went to Kinko's and printed out all these papers of here's what our book's going to look like, and went out and told advertisers how this could help them reach more students. And then, so we did that, and we loved it. And then we wound up deciding we would do it in Providence, Rhode Island as well, because there's a lot of small schools there. That was an awesome business mistake, because we're thinking, oh, we'll find another place. Oh, Providence, it's only 3 hours away. When you don't know what you're doing, it's really good to be close to your business so that when everything goes wrong, you could get there and you could fix it, especially with the business we were in. But it was a ton of fun. So it really was my first entree into advertising and marketing.
So how long, out of curiosity, did you run that business for?
So we did that for 3 years while we were in school, and then just stopped doing it once we graduated. It was a great college business.
Was it profitable? Were you actually making money by doing it too?
Yeah, we made great money for us being students. Yeah. And it's what allowed me to buy all the computer gear that I would later use when I got into the internet and starting an online marketing firm.
So let's talk about that internet. It's a very fascinating tool, huh? It's something that's pretty cool with that. So let's talk about you graduated college, you stopped this business, you discovered the holy internet. I'm guessing, is this Netscape at this time? Like, what type of internet era are we looking at here?
It was Mosaic. It was Netscape.
Mosaic. Woo! That's awesome.
Gopher. It was the early days. So when I graduated college, I lived in an ABC house, which is a better chance. It's a program for gifted inner city minority students. So they live in this house. This one was in Ardmore. They go to a great public school, which is Lower Merion High School. And they have people living with them who are tutors and administrators, kind of help them succeed. It pays no money. So I needed a side job, and I started working for this marketing company, and we started marketing online to sell their publications. And I realized everyone needed a website. And I remember, because I was super excited, I told my brother, I was like, Rob, there are so many ways to make money on the internet. I mean, we could set up the first coupon directory online. We could help people build websites. If you look at what everyone's looking for, they're looking for porn. There's you could do a porn directory. And, obviously that wasn't one that we were going to pursue. But we decided to do a marketing.
Pursue.
Yeah, exactly. we did a marketing firm. And back at that time, a lot of the time was spent going around trying to convince companies that they should be online. So there's this 21-year-old kid who's me coming into these offices, meeting with these older guys, because typically it was men who were running the marketing departments or the IT departments where this was, trying to convince them to do online marketing.
So you went into it with no premeditated plan? You were just I want to work on the internet. I don't know exactly what I want to do on the internet yet, but I know it has to be on the internet.
So that's how I was thinking, but I didn't leave my job until I decided it's going to be online marketing.
Okay.
So where do you how did you identify, was this, I see problems, I can solve them, and I can see money there, or was it just spur of the moment, I think there's something there? How do you identify these opportunities that you really took advantage of, especially at such a young age? It's not something that you just kind of come to,
So for this marketing company I was working for, we were selling publications online. We were getting orders from Sweden and all over the US and Canada and South America. And I just believed that this was going to be the best marketing vehicle, that you could put great content out there. And if you had a great product, be able to market it much wider than otherwise. So I believe this was the future, and was super excited to try to help companies get there.
When you first started it out, on the end of what the product you were trying to create, was it a hard sell? Was it an easy sell? Was it an instant hey, we see exactly what this guy is thinking, what he's trying to do, or was it really I don't know what this guy's doing, he's a little crazy, I don't think we want to do this?
It was extremely hard. I remember I was pitching these one guys, and they looked at me and they said, you should tell people that your dad owns the company because you're really young.
So Josh and I have gone through the same thing with Chop Dog. I mean, starting out, I don't think anyone took it seriously at all.
Yeah, people underestimate the younger generation.
Lack of experience, though, right?
I think one of my favorite stories, Eddie, is the Ocean City story.
That's the first one that comes to mind when I said that. Nobody took it seriously enough to give us any money, but they kind of appreciated what we were doing. But it's the same thing. We see the potential in you, but you should probably pretend like you're not as young as you are, or creative.
Eddie, unfortunately, your audio is terrible. Yeah. So we're going to move on. Eddie's been exempt for this conversation for now.
He's not part of the internet era.
Story.
Yeah, so the story was, number one, I don't recommend this, which is when we started in 2009, we would used to go door to door, to go and get business. So you're talking about everyone needing a website, Brad. Let's jump into this for a second, which is in 2009 when we started Chop Dog and you were just doing websites. It was amazing pulling tooth and nail to convince people they needed a website in 2009. So for context, how long that is since when you started and fought that, you had that fault. And the scariest thing, but it is true. Those who didn't think a website was a necessity in 2009, if I go back to my hometown, they're out of business. They're gone. And I think that says a lot, but it's true. I think it says a lot about they didn't keep up with the date and the time, and they didn't understand the context of where the consumer was going, and they lost, versus the people who understood, all right, we need to be on the web. We need people to find us on Google. We need to now be on Google, right? And I think even there might become a day and time where everyone wants a own mobile app, right? Their own relevancy there. And I think that's going to happen soon as the price point for mobile development does keep coming down lower and lower and lower. It's only a matter of time until you have businesses saying, hey, make a reservation with us, download our app, in that type of context. And they're controlling their own CRM, their own customer management. But getting at in 2009, we went 2009, 2010, we went balls to the wall, just contacting every small business, going door to door. And the story was in Ocean City, New Jersey. There's this main street of like all the traditional businesses. It's very touristy. And we went to this one couple, this old two, and we talked to them for like an hour. And they were like, emotionally, they want to make a decision. But they're at the end, they're like, you guys are adorable. Thank you so much for convincing us to get the website. We'll talk to a legitimate firm now. Like, that's what happened. Like, we won them over an emotional decision of you need a website. And they're like, you guys are adorable. Good luck. We're going to now call a real firm to talk to. Like, that was the context of what happened in Ocean City. But that's what happened. That was like that market back as, you know, when you're young. But we also leveraged it, I think. You know, we knew right away what's one way to get our name out there. Well, the media loves the story of the young entrepreneur. Let's just get every media we knew to write articles about us. So we would like pitch it to the press of Atlantic City. We would like create fake emails and pitch to them like, hey, we heard about these kids that are doing this and they're doing this. And
you did the Reddit method.
And we did. And we would contact local media, and that kind of blew. I mean, that worked so well at the time. It went from the Press of Atlantic, it went from the Current of Egg Harbor Township, which is like a nobody newspaper, to the Press of Atlantic City, which went to Philly.com, which went to NBC South Jersey, NBC Philadelphia, and Fox News Philadelphia. All off of that first article by writing fake emails saying, hey, have you heard about these punk ass kids making websites in South Jersey? But that's how it's kind of hustling your ass off to get to that point, right? And that exposure then started that movement of where you go. But that's kind of how it was leveraged back then.
And I think what you also did, which is really important, is when you're starting a business, whatever you think your weakness is, you have to turn it into a strength.
Yes.
So when
100%.
we were really small, we would say, we are really nimble. We could customize ourselves to what you need. The CEO is going to work on your business. You got the top team. And when we were really large, we would say, we're really large. We've done thousands of these projects. Our team is experienced. We got all these people. So kind of the way you did it, when you said we're young and we're going to use it as an advantage, you need to take your weakness and make it a strength.
I know to answer this question, but for those that haven't listened, how large did your company go to? Because I think people need to understand the context of what you actually built here, because you built a monster in the best context.
So it wasn't a monster. So I started in my bedroom, and then we grew to about 150 people, and then were acquired by aQuantive. And I got to be on the executive team at aQuantive, which was super fun. And then I think we had about 2,000 employees. And then we sold the business to Microsoft and became a part of Microsoft.
I really want to know about the process that you went through from starting in your bedroom to getting acquired, because that whole period is going to be the most relatable for me and Josh, I think, at this point. And it's a really, exciting time, I think, in a company's youth.
It's really exciting and also really scary, because you have this company that you built, and when you're being acquired, you're creating some risk as far as your future. So for our business, in looking at what we were doing, we were the digital ad agency for clients, and a lot of our business was media buying. So all the ads people bought online, we do that for them, for our clients. We would build their websites, we'd manage their email. And over time, clients would say, hey, we have these offices in other locations. We'd like you to open more offices. And we want you to get bigger. And we'd like you to also do maybe our print advertising or something else. So it became clear that clients wanted us to either be a massive digital ad agency, or they wanted us to be part of a full service ad agency. And that's what made me start thinking, okay, maybe we should look for potential partners. And our management team was really experienced. So fortunately, most of the people on my management team had more experience than me. And we kind of talked through what we should be doing, and we started evaluating partners, and we hired an investment bank. And I'd recommend that if you're looking at selling your business, because they can go out and canvas and talk to all these potential buyers. And then when you get down to negotiating, they can negotiate on your behalf. And if you want to ask for something that's a lot, they can do it for you, and you don't come off as the jerk, because eventually you might be working for those guys.
It's actually, because you and I are very good friends with our attorney here at Chop Dog. That's actually my rule of thumb when it comes to any negotiation legal-wise with a new contract, a new client. And I'm very public about this. I refuse to get involved in any legal discussion. I say there's too much personal attachment to it. I say I have an attorney for a reason. Have an attorney talk to him. I don't want to be involved in this, because someone's ego is going to be hurt here, or someone's going to be personally conflicted when it shouldn't be. And ultimately I just care about getting what's fair and reasonable. So let the experts do what they can do, and that you also get that bridge, because the attorney, though he represents your, or he or she represents your best interests, they're not, and you can tell them maybe some things you want to see happen. At the end of the day, it's not your name attached to it and a personal ego. Like, for example, right now, so this is the truth. We finally got ourselves to a financial situation that I finally hired a chief of staff, someone that's in charge of all of our scheduling as a team now, who helps. Literally, if you saw my calendar, it's like a mosaic piece of art. Like, I'll have 20 calls in a day. Half of them throughout the time we're rescheduling last minute, confirming. I can't just keep track of my own schedule anymore. And the thing is, and I think you get this more than most, Brad, which is that time is our most valuable resource. And I know I'm self-aware enough to know that my ego says, everyone that wants to set up a 5-minute call with me, I want to say yes to, because I don't want to be that a-hole that says no. But that's honestly not what's best for business. You know it firsthand from growing such a large company. Every minute matters. So I realized by having JW, who's my chief of staff now for our team, by him being the one to say no, I'm not the a-hole. And he can be the one to be bearing bad news, right? He can be like, listen, Josh's time needs to be focused on these right now. I can't schedule you. But it's the reality. I'm self-aware enough to know that I can't personally do that. But again, I don't have to tarnish my own personal brand at the same point of time. In the legal, we don't have to tarnish our company brand, but understanding, listen, this is a legal end that we're not experts on. This is why we hire and outsource in this area. They can handle it.
I think outsourcing as much as you can is really valuable. Like, you're lucky. So Lee, who's your attorney, is fantastic and has a great business mind.
And a great last name.
And a great last name, Slamowitz.
It's the greatest name.
You get a 5% discount every time I mention it, right? Because I'll just keep going.
They ever tell you the story? I don't know if Lee ever told you the story. I said the reason why I worked with him was because I wanted to find the most Jewish-sounding lawyer possible. So it was fantastic. Mr. Slamowitz plus. I digress there.
It's all good though. I think that the challenge is a lot of lawyers shouldn't be negotiating the business terms, and you want to make sure you keep them out of that. Like, I find that often, like, attorneys can derail a deal. So I want to negotiate all the business points, and then bring it to my lawyer and say, just tell me where the risk is. But yes, if their lawyer's calling, then have them talk to my lawyer.
It's interesting you bring that up, and 98% of the time I agree with you, but Lee's, for example, of context for those who have no idea, Lee's our attorney. He's been with us since so early on and knows our business so intimately. He knows how to negotiate the business side because he understands the risk and upsides of our operations, because he's almost intimately understands our operations, right? He's seen every situation. He's been with us. So I would also recommend, depending on the context of that relationship, you might be able to leverage a little bit more, because if you have an individual that knows the context of like how you work, how you operate, the inherent risk, has been with you through growth, that might be more of an asset. But it's not just that. Like, the same thing with our accountant. We've had a relationship for so long. Our payroll company, we have, and again, I kind of outsource all those areas that is just I either don't care about, or I would lose sleep over if I'm the one handling it myself.
So I noticed that you don't outsource. It didn't seem to me from our emails that you outsource your admin function.
So, for schedule, I won't schedule. If I'm personally have a relationship with someone, I won't have JW, for example, to handle that, because to me, that's me just being an a-hole. Like, with my existing customers, here at Chop Dog, if they want to get on a call with me, I'm telling them just to call my cell or, email me, because there's a reason they're paying for that privilege, right? And they have that relationship. But the reality is, we'll have 50 people contact us a week wanting to schedule a call to see if we can work with them, which is great. But let's be real here. Half of them are not validated, right? Number one. Number two, about maybe half of the half that are validated, is the timing right? Are we the right fit? Those are the things you got to ask too, right? So the reality is, for those who have personal relationships with my team, with my clients, I'm not going to have an intermediate schedule for me. I only will in the context of like, hey, you and I can't figure out a time, instead of something it's about an hour, figure it out. Let me circle in JW. Like, in those contexts, it would work, because that's at least just other personal, you're explaining the situation. Or like, hey, I'm really getting swamped last minute. Let me tag JW in here. He'll figure it out for us. I'm sorry, I'm about to step in a meeting. So those situations will work, but it's not the same as, let's say Dan here, I had no prior relationship with him. And I'll be like, first, I'll still always follow, but like, I'm so thrilled to reach out. And you have to care, right? I talk about this all the time. It's not a computer system. Like, this is a person that's taking the time to truly reach out to you. But I'll be like, listen, I'm going to tag JW in here. He'll handle my schedule. Then he'll handle it back and forth, figuring out time zones, phone numbers, because it's going to save me so much time. And also, it's just an added benefit. And I'm curious to get your mindset out of this too. Our company's growing to a point, we're a team. Right. And it came to a point where I had a realization about 6 months ago. you could be working in your business or you can be working on your business. And I realized for us to scale, I have to be working on my business, not in my business. Like that's a true thing. I realized I was spending too much time in it and I'm stalling our own growth because of that. And having JW there is also a great way to tell the mindset early of a customer or a potential client. Listen, you're dealing with an operation. This is not like my company as a hobby. You know, there's an operation here and a hierarchy here, and there's people have different positions for a reason. And it kind of sets that mindset early on too. So that's also an added bonus and added asset. Plus then if you do work with us, you're like, well, now I have the CEO's cell phone number. I get it. You know, now I'm part of the ecosystem. And I understand that that's the part of the perk of working with a company like us. So I know it's going a long tangent, but that's the rationale as to why and the thought process behind it.
I think it makes total sense. You know, when you're running your business, everything that you say yes to is saying no to something else. So you got to figure out like what's the most important thing to get done for your business, and does this fit in that category? And screening is a great way to filter it out. I know I always get people saying, hey, I'd love to pick your brain. And I always ask them, okay, well, be really specific. What exactly do you want? What exactly do you need? Because first off, half the people don't even respond. So great. I just gave them a little work since they wanted 15 minutes of my time. They didn't email back. I just don't need to follow up. Half follow up with stuff that someone else could help them better with. So I can send them somewhere else and save time. But coming up with that screening is important. And then when you talk about new business, I think for entrepreneurs, the key is you hire someone who's better than you for all the different roles. So you hire a business development person who's better than you, and then you want all the business calls to go to them and they figure it out. And you hire an HR person who's better than you, so you don't have to worry about HR. And then you could work on your business instead of in your business. And I know that's an ideal. Like when you're running a company, stuff goes wrong, you're in and out of the business, but you want to spend as much time as you can, you know, working on the bigger things.
Now, let me ask you this, going to a deep question here, which is for a lot of people listening to the show, they maybe have the time aspect, but they don't have the financial aspect. So this problem you're saying is 100%. If you have the financial ability, being able to delegate out, bring it in, and we're at a very great point where we have that luxury now because we have enough revenue, we have enough clients, we have enough growth that we can say, all right, we're going to hire an amazing salesperson who'd really help expedite sales. We're outsourcing legal, we're outsourcing payroll. We have a chief of staff who runs all our calendars and makes sure we're focusing on the best time. We have designers, developers, right? But there's a lot of startups listening here where it's kind of a situation where it's you and just a founder who don't have that. And they don't have that luxury. So what would you tell them, like those people that just don't have that financial ability to make such a move?
I mean, you got to work like a maniac. You ask I think most founders would say, when you first start your company, you're working like crazy and you're working on everything because you can't afford to do otherwise. And you got to just be selling. You know, the thing to focus on is you got to have something great that people need, and then you need to find someone to buy it. You need to actually solve a problem and get paid. But it's hard. There's a lot to do, and call upon your fellow entrepreneurs. I mean, I found it helpful when I was starting to talk to other people who were in the same situation and ask, how'd you do this? And some of us had different skill sets, so we could help each other in different ways, which was important because ultimately it's if you're not raising money and you're starting a business in your bedroom, it's hard to pay the bills at the beginning.
Yeah.
So one of my big questions for you next is, how did you find your first customers and how did you scale that? So I'm curious about that when you were starting this business in particular.
So a lot of luck and a lot of selling. So when I went to, when I first started the business doing internet marketing, I would show up at Chamber of Commerce meetings. So, you know, I'd be meeting the guy being like, hey, I do health insurance plans. Here's my card. And I'd say, hey, you want me to build your website? And the people selling phone plans, just seeing who I could find. The company I worked for beforehand was a newsletter publishing company. And I went to the national conference for newsletter publishers because I knew that business really well. And I talked to people there and they gave me some speaking slots at the conference. And I was able to, through that, get some small newsletter clients. And kind of, so I'm going around trying to meet everyone I can at events, going to these conferences. And one of my clients, which was Oxbridge Communications, asked me to negotiate with this newsletter on their behalf. And I went down and I negotiated with them, and they were a print newsletter about internet marketing, because back in the early days, that's how people got their news, was by print. And they said, we really like you. You seem really smart. Would you like to write a column for us? We're really sorry, but we could only pay you $350 a month to write the column. And I remember this made them my biggest client. I'm sitting in my bedroom and I'm like, oh, that's really not that much money. But I guess I could do it. So I started writing this column, and then these guys who put on the web advertising conferences, Thunder Lizard Productions, Steve Roth, who was a CEO, was reading my stuff and called me up and said, we'd like to have you speak at our conference. And I went and spoke at the conference, and there were a couple people in the audience from Book of the Month Club and Star Trek Universe that I met with and wound up converting them into clients. And then the creative we did for them got covered in a lot of different publications. So then other people started calling. And then a woman who was writing a book on internet advertising. So then from there, a lot of people started asking me to speak at their conferences. Robin Zeff, who was writing a book on internet advertising, was at one of these conferences. She had asked me, hey, would you co-author this book with me? So suddenly when I was going to pitch, I had this book, Internet Advertising, or it was actually called Advertising on the Internet, that I could bring with me to pitches. So it just kind of grew by selling everywhere I could. And I was all over the place. Let me try to boil it down to what I think worked. I went to a business I knew. I knew the newsletter publishing business, so I sold those guys first. By being able to publish, it positioned me as an expert, and I found opportunities to speak at conferences, which also helped a lot. And then when we got a client, when I got a client, because it was just me at the beginning, I would spend so much time with that client so I could figure out how to get more business from them, because that was my best source of revenue. It wasn't necessarily getting new clients, but it was selling more to current clients. And along the way, there were tons of little failures. I signed up to do a trade show booth at this conference. It was my first trade show, and I came with like a table and this little display, and it was a huge trade show. All the booths next to me had attractive people that they had hired to be at their booths, and they were giving away all this valuable free stuff.
Just smiling.
Exactly.
Come see me.
But you got to you try and see what works, and then try to sell. I hope that answered the question well.
That was an awesome answer. So I'm going to ask the next question here, which is, if you started an advertising agency today, what would you do that was the same back then? What would you do differently today?
I would, because I wouldn't have to start it in my bedroom, just myself. I would go and get amazing people who I've worked with in the past. That is an awesome cup, by the way, John.
It's actually two things. One, this was actually given to me by Eddie on the show. It's sponsored by Dave & Buster's. Not a plug to the show. It's just, I think Eddie won from a Dave & Buster's.
I'm a Dave & Buster's fan. What can I say?
And two, so pay us, Dave & Buster's, every time we say your word on the show. Second, I've been trying to increase my water intake, and I'm like, I drink 3 of these a day. I'm definitely at my water intake that it should be at.
You're probably drowning if you drink 3.
It's a great metric to follow by. So
looks like a gag glass. Like it's too big for you. It's like it's way entirely too big.
Listen, there's a Brad. You'll get this. You ever heard of Frankfurt Hall over in Fishtown?
Yes,
Beer garden. I wonder if I brought this with me and say fill this up, if they would do it.
It looks like it doesn't look as big as their humongous cup. I feel like if you had that thing filled with beer or something that looked like beer,
you would die by alcohol poisoning.
The casual surfer on the Blab site would say, I got to go check this show out.
Yeah. Maybe, well, you know what? There's a little context back in the day when we were first proposing the show, Eddie and I, we wanted to call the show Winding Down. And the idea was like all being tuxedos with like a glass of whiskey as we had the conversation. So that was like the original concept of the podcast way back like 2 years ago. And yes, Todd, free Slurpee that you're 100% right.
Idea, Todd. I like that idea.
Todd, I'll actually get you one at Dave & Buster's. You and I can actually go together. It'll be a lot of fun. So anyways, go back to the question here. So our poor bladders. So going back to it, Brad. So you'll get more amazing people. What's one characteristic you would keep the same that you did the first time around?
I mean, I think from looking at businesses, a lot of times they start with too much money, and then they're not making the best decisions. So are
you talking about like VC, like money they put into it early on, like versus like they raise money early or generate too much revenue early? What do you mean by too much money?
So what I've seen is people raise money and then they act as though they can spend all that money instead of waiting to prove they could, have a product or service that sells, that's profitable, and then using that money to scale. So I'm a one-person company. I raised money. I'm going to hire a director of sales. It's not someone who's actually sold stuff before, but it's someone who's run sales at a big company, and their solution is to hire more salespeople. And that's how they're going to grow it. I think that's a danger that I see with companies. What I would keep the same is like keep it lean. I'd bring in the best people, but I wouldn't go out and hire an army. I wouldn't go out and...
We actually tried that, Josh, if you remember the apartment biz, when we tried to hire a sales force, and that didn't work at all. And we didn't really spend a lot on it because it was like mostly commission based, which is, I think, smart. But
well, there's a couple of mistakes. Well, I mean, listen, number one, we as a company have made every mistake you can think of.
Yeah.
So that's number one. But two, we also there's also a point where you have to spend money to be effective. And we were like too lean, I think, number one. And two, we also spread ourselves way too thin because I think when you're hiring the first people, you have to like spend a lot of time and energy getting them in the ecosystem. And back then, Eddie, our reaction was like, we will go so big, so quick and see what happens, which is not going to be.
I think we didn't know our audience well enough at that time either because we were selling ourselves. You and I were still trying it. It still wasn't working.
I would have to reiterate Brad's point. So we just raised one of our first pieces of our seed round, and we had an individual from a CTO or board of advisors role, and we let him know like, hey, we got some funding, and we were like, could you lay out a plan of what you kind of see like spending? And he basically spent the entire amount in about 2 months on all these developers, and we don't have market fit yet. We don't know where the product's going. We don't have any sales or anything like that. So I have to definitely, like I said, reinforce. You have to be very strategic, and you got to know how that's going to play in the short term and your long-term vision as you're developing your business and your product. Because it is just it feels like it's such it's what everyone does. And I feel like you got money, we got to buy developers. We got to get developers right now and get a team going. And it's just not the way to look at it, or at least not to build a strategy off that idea. So
I agree. And I think there's also a misperception that not every, but so many businesses think it's a race. Like, if I don't go super fast, I'm going to lose this opportunity. And in some cases, it is a race.
I think in tech, it is a lot
fast.
And think in tech, because it moves so quickly, people feel that way. Like, if their idea isn't out there, within a few months, someone else is going to take it, or they're going to miss their opportunity.
But it's not the case. I mean, you look at companies that, take Hotmail as an example. They were the first provider of free email. If first is best, they'd be in awesome shape. And the early social networks of, there was GeoCities, there was Friendster.
RIP, rest in peace, guys.
Exactly. I wish I kept all those T-shirts so I could have an RIP wall in my basement.
That'd be a great Halloween party.
Exactly. Wear defunct company clothing.
So we did 1 year at our company for our Halloween party. We did set up a graveyard with tombstones and companies that had gone out of business. And that was kind of fun.
That's a good one.
You can just do every Google property they've ever shut down.
We don't have enough people. We don't know enough people to do that.
It is interesting you bring that up, though. So actually, there's another thing, too. I think people don't realize when you're raising money, people look at it as a milestone. And we've talked about that a few times on the show, but not a lot of people realize you're giving up equity. Like, you're basically giving people, they're buying a piece of your company. And people I feel a lot of entrepreneurs in the scene right now are not harnessing that fact. They're like, the reality is you're giving up equity of your company.
They're not donations?
No, I feel like,
well, it could be depending on how you do it, but yes.
So I want to ask this, Brad, from your perspective as an investor in particular, which is you probably deal with pitches, God knows how many times often when people, the second people know you're an investor, they're probably going to be pitching you left and right. It's the reality of it. When do you think is the right time for a company to say, I need to raise money versus them being inherently lazy and saying, you're not ready to raise money yet. You need to do X, Y, and Z to even think about that question. Because I am curious, because I feel like the definition is changing, especially you see kind of the market kind of getting a little bit worse and worse. You start to see people kind of like figuring it out like, shit, this might not be the right time to raise money too.
So it It depends. I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I'll tell you what I'm thinking. And also, I'm in a really niche area. So I'm investing in internet marketing technology companies every time to date with someone I personally know involved in that company, which I feel like gives me an extra layer of comfort. But yeah, I think people should raise money as late as they can. So often people are like, I got this great idea. I want to raise money. That's how I'm going to grow it. And as you say, they don't realize that by raising money, they're giving up part of their business. And suddenly they're giving up control also. You could have a boss. And what amazes me is people will go out, pitch to raise money, and they won't even want to do a reference check. If someone's funding you and they're going to be your partner, you should call the CEOs of the other companies they invested in and say, what's life like with this investor? And so for the entrepreneurs out there, you should also ask, what are you going to do for me? So you can get money from different places, but who can introduce you to clients or help you be really strategic about your product plan or help you grow the business? So I think entrepreneurs are ready when they value what they do enough that they're asking those questions and trying to figure out what they get out of a raise. I also tend, early on, I think entrepreneurs often underestimate how much money they need. So you see people saying, all I need is this much, but they haven't yet sold a client. They haven't gotten far enough to know what they actually need. Yep. And if you have a really strong opportunity, you can increase your value by taking it further before you go for funding.
So we tried to, or we followed as much as we could in that footsteps. So we bootstrapped our app, which actually at one point we were going to hire Josh, but he's not in Chicago, so that doesn't help me at all. But anyways.
Since when is that excuse, Dan? We just launched a client in Bangkok, Thailand. I don't want to hear that bullshit.
I like collaborating in person with everyone.
Come fly to Philly. It's like $70 round trip flights, man.
Calm down, guys. Calm down.
Anyway,
cheesesteaks.
But yeah, that's true. But what I say is, so, as we're approaching, more and more investors, it's really interesting that when we come in and we have this MVP built and we're at this stage where we're in the market fit stage, that they get a lot more excited. And we're like, wow, they've really kind of taken it as far as they can. They didn't run for money to start and build their product. They have this, it's not just they have this, 1, 2, and 3 steps ahead. They've really thought through, here's all these things that we're going to do.
You're less risk. That's what it is. You're
exactly. And that's the thing is it's not just even, it's so far thought out and all these different, potential things that can happen, and coming in makes us such a more attractive, I feel like, to investors to be like, okay, I could see why I might want to give these guys, the money. And going back to your other point, I definitely agree. One big thing that I see is some people think it is as simple as just, hey, I need to get money. And it's not. It's so much more, like there's investors that just give money, and that's great. But then there's the investors, like you said, they bring the connections, they bring the growth, the experience, the team potentially that you're going to build, and that's so much far more valuable than money can ever be, in a lot of senses. So
I agree with everything you said.
And by the way,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say Dan Gill, who's one of our clients that's watching the show, he's in Chicago. So yeah. So excuses, man. I get it. But nonetheless, Brad.
I do think it's something you said that I agree with. So when I'm investing in companies, I think every time I've invested so far, it's been a company that's taken what they believe in far enough that they have clients already. It's a much scaled down version of what they eventually plan to have, but they have clients. So they've proven that they could sell. They've proven that there's need. And there's someone I could talk to as an investor and say, are you paying for this? How much will you pay for this? And do better due diligence.
So how hands-on are you as an investor? Like what companies you invested in? Like what is your approach with them? Do you wait for them to come to you? Do you ask for meetings with them? Like what is your routine as an investor?
I'm extremely hands-off. I tell people, if you need me, tell me what I can do to be helpful. And we try to set up front. Like I'll ask, what are you looking for? How can I help your business? And we'll come up with a plan for how I can provide that. If I invest in someone, I have a lot of faith in the entrepreneur, and I want them to run their business, and I want them to come to me when they have a question I could help with. I have been on the boards of some companies that I've invested in, and I don't know that that's incredibly valuable. I think just being able to be there when they want to call because they've got an issue that comes up, and then when I'm invested in a company, I'll randomly make connections. So I'll meet someone and say, oh, you should talk to this company. And then I'll just make those introductions. But I'm not heavily involved. I'm only involved where the entrepreneur wants me to be, or if I see a huge opportunity that I want to push them towards.
So have you had anyone that you've invested in that wanted more involvement out of you, that you were like, oh, I didn't realize this is what you guys needed or wanted from me? Is it like, have you ever had a business like need you a lot more than you expected?
So there was one business that I was looking at investing in, got close to, we had an agreement in place, and they basically wanted me to become their CEO with how much they were asking me to do. And it just wasn't a good fit because, you know, I didn't want to replace the CEO and I didn't want to be the CEO. So I did have that happen once. Fortunately, discovered it prior to investing.
So one of my questions for you is, you ran an agency, which just like how we are here at Chop Dog, and especially for a lot of people, it's one of the hardest type of business models you can build, right? Because it's very cash flow dependent, very customer based. It's not technology. It's not just residual income. So, but one of the things too is you see a lot of these applications coming out here right now in the marketplace, mobile, web, software, that just don't have any monetization plan in place day one. So just as an entrepreneur, is it in your core values, you think you need to have a business model day one? Or do you agree with the people who go more to Snapchat model, which is, we'll build it, if they come, we'll figure it out later? I'm just curious, like, just your opinion where you come. You can obviously see from my narrative where I'm biased, so I don't mean to come off biased, but I'm really curious what your mindset is with those type of businesses.
So my preference is, so as an investor, I prefer a business model in advance. And I think if you build something that gets a ton of traction and you are going to figure out how to monetize it, those are harder to win on because fewer of them succeed. They're going to be massive successes when they're going to be a success, but I think you need to invest in a lot of companies to play those odds. You know, that said, if there's a company I invested in and the senior management team went off to do something different after they sold, and they said, we don't know what business we're going to do, but it's going to be in this space because we see a lot of money here and we see opportunity, and we're going to talk to customers and figure it out. And I was interested in investing in that business because they were just at too early a stage, but they weren't investing all this money to grow something and figure out how to make money later. And I do think that's appropriate for some people who are investing. If you got to have a huge portfolio, I think, so that you know that you're going to get the
upside, you get the ROI back. So Raph Anthony on the live chat's asking, Brad, how do you educate yourself in a new industry before you invest? And I know you do like internet marketing technologies. There must be new technologies you stumble upon. Like, holy crap, that's a thing. I'm guessing that's where the context of this question comes from.
So I just call people up on the phone, even though it's a digital age. I try to find somehow, and this is where LinkedIn has been really valuable. When I'm going to invest in something I don't know about, I go on LinkedIn to try to find someone I know or someone, a colleague or friend of mine knows, who can give me information. So, I was investing in basically a company called Flex.com, and they're an Airbnb for warehouse space. Love the management team, like the concept, know nothing about warehouse space. But I was able to find a guy who was CEO of a shipping company and a few other transportation folks, so I could talk to them to learn about it. So I try to find whoever the customer is going to be, and I try to find someone who I know through a personal connection, so they'll tell me the truth. And it just won't be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, or no, I wouldn't do it. They'll say, I would buy that, or I wouldn't. So I try to find people to talk to because I'm not going to learn it all on my own.
How often do you bet on the jockey versus the horse? So like, you're like, I'm betting on you being successful. Your idea, maybe I'm not 100% on, but you as a person, I believe you're going to be successful. Like, does that ever happen to you at all?
Yes. Because when you invest really early stage, businesses change. So you'll have this idea of what's going to be the right thing to do. And once you start working with clients, you discover they actually need something that's slightly different. So I'm always really concerned with the jockey. The person has to be able to understand problems and then change their business if they need to. So I want a great entrepreneur who can adjust and adapt. And ideally, it's an idea that I believe in from the start, but I'm comfortable that it might change.
Honestly, I feel like you can't really look at that any other way at an early stage startup for exactly that reason. You really are. And again, I'm not an investor, but I feel like being in this early stage, when investors talk to us, they're investing in us 100%, almost 100% of it, because like you said, like we did our original product, our original offline customer test, et cetera, et cetera. And where we're at now is not the same in the slightest. And that's why I think like investors, like we get that. So it's you guys, that are the valuable asset here for us. Like you said, the jockey.
Right. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you are asking? So let's say you have an introduction and it's someone you might know that's looking for investment. Like what are the contexts? Like give people like the idea from your perspective, the things you're asking for, what you're looking at, what you're trying to do to understand a better picture, a better scope of where you're thinking I might invest or not. So like what's some of the things that runs in your head?
So when I'm thinking of investing, the person is extremely important. I prefer someone that I know because I don't have a fund. It's my own investments. I'm not investing in a ton of companies. I want companies where I'm somehow connected. So I know it's a great entrepreneur. I've worked with them. A close friend of mine has worked with them. They can take advice. A lot of entrepreneurs, because like we have something in our head that we really want to do. We have a vision. Often it's really hard for entrepreneurs to take advice. I need to work with someone who could take advice because their clients are going to give them really good ideas and they've got to be able to take that. And so are their advisors. So an entrepreneur who could take advice, someone who could sell, really, really high ethical standards. I don't want to have to question what's going on. I want to let them run free and trust that they're doing what's best for the company. And I love it if they have a track record. So if they've done it before and they have experience in a startup, they know what they're getting into. So I look for that. I look for a market that I understand. And I say that because when I ran my agency in the past, one of the giant mistakes I made was that we had these clients come to us with massive budgets in the .com bubble days. And I remember thinking, I have no idea how you're going to make money. But if someone gave you $10 million to spend on advertising, there must be a good idea. I must just not understand it. And I'd take them on as clients. And of course, when the .com crash came, those guys all went out of business. Exactly. So I've learned that if I don't understand something, I got to stay far away. No matter who else is getting in, no matter what else, what great press they have, I have to understand it. I like to get. I like someone who's not. I like to get in at a really early round. So typically, it's the first funding they're getting, the angel round, and then be able to get in at future rounds too. So as they scale up, if they're doing additional investing, I like a really clear customer. Like the best case is they have some customers I could talk to and I can get feedback on the business, and they have smart people that they're working with. So
one big question for you is, what's one piece of advice you would give to an entrepreneur who's just starting off? Like, what is the one thing you would tell them as advice?
Oh man, that's hard because there's so much stuff. Let me
there has to be that one. There has to be that cream.
Okay, I'll chime in. I want to know what you could give us advice on for scaling, as far as scaling goes. Like, what's the one piece of advice you would give to a young company that's trying to get bigger and do it kind of like stable?
So, I'll start with the scale question because that's easier. For the scale, doing it's not easier, but the advice is easier. I think to scale, it's a combination. So you've got to bring in people who can scale. And the challenge is, a mistake I made in my business was when we started scaling, I found these executives who ran really large companies and I brought them in and they just were a bad cultural fit and they didn't know how to be nimble. So finding that right person who is an expert in what you need them to do, who can manage a much larger team as you grow and think about the business and fits culturally. I think for scaling, the number one job you have, assuming you have the clients, the number one job you have is talent scout, finding great people who can lead you where you need to go. And in addition to that, at the same time, staying super close to your clients, because as you scale, like the best ideas for scaling come from your clients, and learning where you're messing up comes from clients. and this is related to like the Chop Dog business and the business that I was in, where if you're friends with your clients, they give you a heads up before they fire you. Because when you're scaling, it's hard to provide the best service because you're just growing really fast and stuff will slip through the cracks. But to scale, you need to hang on to your clients and keep growing revenue. So for the entrepreneur advice, I think my advice would be to be a great listener. There's so many people who have done it before. And I find that the entrepreneurial community is extremely helpful. Everyone wants to contribute. They want to pitch in. They want to help out. And talk to people and listen to what they're telling you about your business. Don't be so set that you can't change your mind. Talk to clients and really listen to them. And wherever you're having problems, talk and listen. I think that's the most important thing, because you're not going to know it all, but because you're just starting your business, you have to actually do it all because you can't afford to hire people. You don't have a big team. So those would be my answers to those questions.
And have them on your podcast.
Start a podcast for sure.
The parallels that I see between this, what you told us about coming up from working out of your bedroom, from what Josh and I have been doing since day one, is so similar. We've done all the same things as far as like Josh doing the speaking events and like just building the credibility and building the brand, and like all those things really helped bring us our work.
We're currently in the scaling stage of operations, in case you couldn't tell from the context of Eddie's questions.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Just good stuff.
What I love about Chop Dog also is you guys are scaling and you're still involved in the community. So Josh, what you're doing, being a mentor at Big Brothers Big Sisters, having you come into my class and volunteer to come into my class again and speak to my teenage entrepreneurial class, that's awesome. I think it's important to try to have that balance, and it gives you perspective, because when you scale, there can be a lot of pain involved, but if you're also involved in the community and doing good work, it's a good balance of all right, I can get through.
So, and no, you hit the nail on the head, which is I'm very much trying to be always self-aware and always very self-critical on ourselves and our operations. And one of the things, and I love picking the brains of brilliant people. Like I told you, I'm the dumbest guy in my own company. I'm the dumbest guy probably in this whole chat. But the coolest thing is when you're the dumbest guy and you talk to people, you're always learning. And I think it's twofold, which is one, I really do think you're right. Perspective, helping, it has to be in your DNA to give back, because as a company, you need to give back to your customers. You need to give back to your fans. You need to give value. As a person, you need to give back value to, if you're in a better situation than someone else, you have to support that situation, help others get to that same plateau as you are, or get as far up as possible. And then second, I kind of mention this all the time about us, the Chop Dog. We're very, very proud of being home in Philadelphia. In fact, I think Philadelphia is one of the most underrated cities in the entire country. In fact, I just wrote an article for Startup Grind. We're going to be putting in Startup Grind's blog very much about how Philadelphia is just totally unrepresented. This city is an incredible city. It's affordability, the talent that's here, the ability to grow an ecosystem here. There's no saturation yet. And that's also another part, is giving back to this community, because I feel like if you do that too, especially in a situation like Philly, it is going to get to the point where it'll be incredibly saturated one day, which is not negative. But if you build a brand now and you give back now to the community, and you're one of the reasons it grows at that point, you're also looked at as automatically a thought leader. It's almost like this epic life hack while simultaneously doing a good thing. And you see it happen in all different situations.
I think, so two things that you said that resonate with me. Number one, I think Philly is a great city. I'm sure Chicago is great as well, but Philly is a great city for startups because it's small and there's a small business community. Everyone knows everyone. And, when we started our business, we were in the projects were across the street from our office. It was a very scary neighborhood. It was hard to hire employees because people would come for interviews and then leave these voicemails like, hey, I drove by and I couldn't even imagine parking my car here. So I'm not going to interview. And we went and met with the mayor's business action team. And they said, anytime you have a client coming in or an important meeting, call us and we'll send the police through and clean up the streets. And they cleaned up the cars, because cars would be there and all the parts would go one by one. And eventually the car would just be on cement blocks. Even the tires would be gone. But they would come in and clean it up because it's Philadelphia. It's a small city. And the business community is small. So when you have problems, you can talk to people and actually get help and get involved. So I think sometimes being in a smaller city is a huge advantage.
I think also, not to cut you off because of your second item, but we're in a small but large city simultaneously,
Right.
with communities. And the second thing is Philly's reinvesting a lot into the entrepreneurial tech scene now, between Nerd Street, between the tax incentives, and just the community itself. So this city has a lot going for it, even beyond where I think 10, 15 years ago. Even now, it's in such a greater spot, yet it's still not even on the radar.
So the second thing is, when you were talking about giving back, it just made me think something else that's really important for entrepreneurs is always remember, you got to give back to your employees. So the people who work with us give so much, and it's important for us to figure out what can we do to help them with their professional goals, with their personal goals, and make sure that that's a major focus. Like our clients are our employees as well as our clients who are paying us money.
So it's interesting to bring this up. So one of our recent hires, literally one of the things he brought to our attention before I hired is like, I'm looking for a situation where it's honestly not about the pay, but I need to be a situation I can challenge and grow as a person, right? In a company that I can make a magnitude, I can make a difference, and as well, I can grow and learn from it, where I'm not going to be stuck. So no, 100% agree. You have to look at all those aspects. And yeah, I actually see a very common thread similar to you. We'll talk to 50, 100 entrepreneurs per week, right? So you see a lot of common similarities. And I also, not to sound cynical here, but I really do believe this, which is people are either entrepreneurs or they're not. There's a lot of entrepreneurs right now, and they don't have the entrepreneur DNA. And when the going gets tough, they're going to go back to their jobs or back to school, whatever, because being an entrepreneur right now is the cool thing, right? I think you saw in the dot-com bubble where everyone wanted to become an entrepreneur because of the dot-com bubble. You saw recently when the economy came good and the movie The Social Network came out and everyone thought Instagram got sold in 500 days for $1 billion. I can do that. So I think you see these bubbles, and I think the next few years is going to go back down again, and then it's going to keep kind of going in cycles, because I think it's just the natural course of entrepreneurship too.
I agree. I think entrepreneurship is hard to teach. You could foster it, but it's got to be in your DNA. I think it's in your DNA. Like the people who are entrepreneurs, that's what we have to do. Like there's not another option for us. And I think you need that drive to be successful, because there's some, extremely difficult times when you're in business for yourself.
So another question, as you scaled your company and you went from kind of the entrepreneur role to CEO role, because that's two different things. It really is. There's a difference between being a founder CEO versus being a CEO of a company that's growing. What was the biggest learning curve for you when that happened?
Letting go. So I was so used to doing everything that even though I was hiring great managers who were better than me in their area of expertise, I had to really pull myself back. And it was helpful that my managers told me that I was just getting too involved in the business and let it go, which allowed us to have a better product because they were going to deliver better than me, and allowed me to focus on the bigger things that we needed to do as a company. So I think that's difficult because you're used to doing it and you have a certain vision. I read this article about advertising. They said the sky's never going to be the right shade of blue. And what they were saying is if you're a creative director and your team comes in and they present you with an ad, you're always going to say, oh, make the sky a little bit bluer. No one likes it when you do that. They want to hear, you did a great job. If it's great. So, you got to decide where you get involved and really let people run with what they're doing. So
before we get into kind of how you're giving back now, I'm curious, what is your day-to-day routine look like right now? Like an average day for you?
There's no average day. I'd say
outside of daily podcasts.
On any given day, I'm working with teens who are entrepreneurs. So I'll be working with one of my teens on either thinking about their business or also thinking about their lives and or their housing situation or something related to them where I could be helpful. I'm also very engaged with Big Brothers Big Sisters and various other youth nonprofits. So on any given day, I might be involved with a Big Brothers Big Sisters project or a different youth nonprofit. And less often, I am looking at potential investment deals or talking to the companies I've invested in because they have a question, they need some help. And then I'm also writing. I love writing. So I try
to get feedback on your book, by the way. Got to email you that later.
I look forward to it. But I just enjoy writing. So I try to do that. I try to do at least hour and a half every day.
Do you run a blog ever? Do you ever like just put out a lot of blog posts?
So I do have a blog. It's and I don't put out a ton of blog posts because for some reason, whenever I write stuff, I hold on to it for a long time thinking, well, I want to make it perfect.
It's like the complete opposite.
Does it become irrelevant at some point?
It doesn't, because my blog is just about happy stories. So
I'm curious, like Seth Godin's obviously like kind of like the king of marketing, digital marketing, right? People always assuming his mantra is I'm just going to write content, put it out right away. He won't even like proofread it. He writes an article a day and puts it out there and just like it's good enough. So it's like the complete opposite mindset there.
And he's got the right mindset. From a marketing standpoint, if I was going to be completely objective, that's what I should be doing. I should be just putting everything out there because that's how you grow an audience. That helps your SEO rankings. So you'll come up more often and higher in Google. But it's a little bit of a passion project and a work of art for me. So I'm not thinking of it as much as a business.
Got it. So Josh Lopez asks, Brad, in early days, did you battle any anxiety or depression? If so, how did you deal with it?
So I didn't have to battle depression, but there was some huge anxiety. So there was a time where I told you earlier about all those clients that went out of business, and we didn't have enough money to maintain payroll. And a mistake I made was, instead of saying we can't afford all of our staff, we should have a layoff, I said, I'm going to find new clients. We're going to keep everyone on as long as possible, which demoralized people because there was a lot of people who didn't have work to do. And also depleted the finances to a point where when we finally had to have the layoffs, we couldn't give really nice severance to people. We were at the low end because we had spent all our money thinking that we'd find new business. And I was extremely anxious then. I would dream every night. I had this crazy recurring dream that I'd get a call from someone saying, we want to hire you to do all of our work. How much will it cost? And I said, I'll do it at cost. I just want to get the work and employ my people. And I'd wake up so happy. And then it'd be like, crap, it's a damn dream. What really helped me was the community work that I do, because, the business stuff was stressful and difficult. But, when I put that in the context of what I see happening to kids in the community and all the unfair stuff out there, it's not that bad. It's something that I can get through. So the community service work, I didn't do it to relieve my anxiety that would come up in business and end in life, but it was a very helpful balance for me. And then also I found meeting with other entrepreneurs. So I would get together with fellow entrepreneurs. We all had the same problems, and just being able to talk about it and realize you're not alone was a huge help for me. That was great.
So another question off the top of my head is, what would you say, the biggest failure in your career, and what did you learn from that?
The biggest failure.
Yeah, so I realize it's a tough one, but what would you say is the one that stands out to you the most? Like, this is the defining failure moment I ever had, and here's what I did and learned from it.
There's a lot of failures that were really big. I think waiting on the layoffs was the biggest, because a lot of our employees got
relationships you had?
Go ahead.
Did that hurt the relationships you had with your employees? I mean, after you got to that point.
So yes, and I'll answer that question. The problem was, if I had done it earlier, the business would have been healthier and I could have given like great severances. Instead, I created a huge risk where we used up most of our cash. Luckily, that did not tank the business, but it was inexperience. And I wanted to do the right thing, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I wasn't. And a lot of people were really upset afterwards for obvious reasons, right? Because you're going to ask, why am I the one who got laid off? Someone else didn't. Over time, all those relationships have healed. Like, I don't know, as far as I know, like people who were really upset, since then we've gotten together and they kind of understand what happened. But it was a really difficult and pretty awful time.
So what advice would you give for an agency style business listening to this? So figure like an example like Chop Dog. Like, so this is not an actual technology based project or excuse me, a client or like app. So if you're an agency, what would be the one tip of advice you would give that a lot of people don't talk about in the agency business model? I know there's a couple of agencies that listen to this. Plus my own selfish question, but I'm very curious to hear the answer. Yep. They're just asking for a friend.
Of course. And I'm going to tell you a few things that I'm thinking of. One, what really helped us a lot was productizing. When you have an agency, to make more money, you have to hire more people and do more work in general. Like there's code that you could reuse and things you could reuse, but you're in a service business. And we worked really hard to come up with technology products that would be able to serve a lot of clients. So we had, and that wound up being the core of our business, where as aQuantive, we made the most money, which was we would figure out tools that we built for us as an agency. And I say we, this was aQuantive when I was a part of aQuantive, but I wasn't the person who built them. I wish I came up with it. But the tools that the team built, we sold to 50% of the agencies. So 50% of the ad agencies in the country were using the tools that we built to help us run our business. Because we looked at everything to say, how can we productize this? Even if it gives us a competitive advantage, we're much better off not just using this on our clients, but allowing every agency to buy it. And we also came up with specific products for our clients. We had a search product where it was a yearly subscription, and we would use technology to help our clients with their search marketing. And we had a lot of clients who advertised on health websites. So we partnered with a health website to come up with a site that we both owned, so that we also had a product where we got some of the ad revenue. But I think for us to capitalize the most, we were looking at what products can we develop, what can be reused. Also, I think what people forget is in the agency, you're always thinking about growing. So you're meeting with new clients, you're pitching new clients. The most important thing with clients is the clients you have, your best clients. Spend time with them, understand their problems. All of our new products, not all, but most of them, it came from our clients and spending time with them and listening to them. And that's where we grew our business the most, not just adding another product, but doing more for the clients we already had, which was really important. And as I said before, constantly be scouting for talent. Even if you don't need someone now, like look around, find people you like, meet with them, build a relationship so that you could hire them when you need it, because that tends to be a giant bottleneck.
And it's so easy with social media now. I mean, you just follow people you respect and appreciate, and they're there. You need to.
Exactly.
So here's one from Mr. Todd Miller. Question: do you think the agency landscape is the same, harder, or easier than what it was when you were growing it at iFrontier?
So when we were growing iFrontier, the challenge was that people didn't really believe in digital. So we had to sell them on using digital. And I think now if you're a digital agency, if you have to sell someone on digital, they're just a bad client. You're wasting. The filter should filter them out, which makes it a little bit easier. I think we could charge a lot of money when we started because there weren't a lot of agencies doing what we're doing. And now digital's become a little more commoditized, and there's more pricing pressure than there's been in the past. But as far as selling into clients, there's always been clients who want specialty shops. So there's always room for the digital specialist like Archer, Chop Dog, iFrontier back in the day to work with those clients. And there's always clients who are going to want the giant solutions, and they're not the potential clients. There's a lot more people with expertise now, and there's a lot more agencies, which makes it, a little bit harder because there's just so much noise out there, I think. But there's also tons of opportunity if you're on the edge and doing great work like you guys are doing.
So let's go to some of the. Oh, is that Eddie?
I was just going to ask kids how old your kids are and if they're showing entrepreneurial ambitions.
So we have a 6-year-old son, and he is entrepreneurial. He wants everything to be a negotiation. You know,
6 years.
one of his uncles is in car sales. I think he learns it from him, but he's always trying to negotiate, trying to sell stuff. So we'll see where that goes.
That's fantastic.
Thanks.
So let's talk about giving back a little bit. What was the first time you started giving back? Like, what made you want to do that? And talk a little bit about what you're doing today as far as giving back.
So I've been involved in the community since high school. When I was in high school, my mom signed me up to be in this buddy program for kids who had lost a parent. And I would go to this community center and play with the kids, and I just loved it. So I owe her for kind of introducing me to service. And it's just so much fun. I have this feeling that I'm unfairly lucky. You know, I was born into a great family. I was born into a great school system, and a lot of love. And some people, just because of where they're born, don't have that opportunity. And that's always driven me to want to help other people and make it more fair and provide opportunities. And it's really fun. You know, there's so much energy in working with kids, and I've got to do it in so many different contexts. I feel like I'm always learning. It keeps me on my toes. I learn a whole lot of slang that I have no business knowing and can't even use right.
But you can use it on this podcast. It's not too late.
Exactly.
You should start using it in your writing.
That would be ratchet.
That's lit.
Awesome.
You're trying to finesse me?
Well, here's the thing, Brad. I haven't heard enough Johns in this conversation today. So,
well, I use it all wrong, so it's very entertaining.
So, talk about a little bit about how you got involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters and kind of what your role's been here in the Philadelphia area with Big Brothers Big Sisters.
So originally, Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. So my wife and I, in looking for charities we wanted to get involved with, did a lot of research. Actually, let me take a step back. In college, we had a Big Brothers Big Sisters program that I ran. I came in, I saw it as like, I got to do this. So I was running the college Big Brothers Big Sisters program, which actually, all the attorneys would keel over now. It wasn't Big Brothers Big Sisters. We mistakenly called it that. We weren't affiliated, but we were matching college students with local kids, and it was a lot of fun. And when I started my digital business, Big Brothers Big Sisters of America had come to me and said, hey, we noticed that you donate some money to us, because I always just like to try to give some money to charity. This was years ago, way early on. And we're relaunching online, and we're doing this digital rebranding. Would you mind consulting? And I started consulting with them. And they're like, hey, you should meet the guys at the local Big Brothers Big Sisters. And I met with them, loved the mission, joined the board. And I've been a Big Brother now for 6 years. And I've worked with a lot of mentoring organizations. So my wife and I have mentored kids. I've been doing it since high school, as I said. I've always been mentoring kids. And then when we got married, my wife and I would mentor kids together. And Big Brothers Big Sisters had the best system for making it work. It just was extremely well organized. And
it's uncanny how well they can match bigs with littles. It's uncanny.
It is amazing. I mean, the interview process that we use at Big Brothers Big Sisters helps us find the right matches and the support, because it's not like you can just pair up a kid and an adult and a relationship works. A lot of times you need coaching. Things come up in a kid's life, and a big brother or big sister might need to call a mat support person and say, hey, what do I do? My little doesn't have enough food, or this problem's happening. And all the research shows incredible outcomes as far as less likely to be incarcerated, less likely to use alcohol or drugs or fight, and more success in school and more success in life. So I just dove in full head first, joined the board, became board chair, served my term as board chair. Now I'm still on the board working with the organization because it's so much fun.
So let's also talk about the class that you teach here in Philly. So talk a little bit about how you got involved with that too, because I'm very curious about that one. I don't even think I've ever asked you that question.
So there's a program in Philadelphia called Schoolyard Ventures that works with teenage entrepreneurs. And Rich and Christian, who ran it, were asking me, would you want to teach a class? And I told them, I really like to work with kids who don't have as much opportunity. So, I want to, if you ever have a class that's kids that don't have as much opportunity as you'd like, that's who I want to teach. And they match me up with class. So I teach entrepreneurship to these teenagers, and it's awesome. It's not a class where I lecture. So to learn to do business, you got to do business. So one class, the whole class starts a business as a class. And our classes have done cool stuff. We did tie-dye bucket hat business. We did a t-shirt business. We've done pretzel rod businesses. And then the kids who are really into entrepreneurship and show promise and are interested can take the next class where they start individual businesses. And that's following their passion. And we've had, this one woman had a very successful clothing business, and now she's a sophomore at Howard University as a fashion major. We've had kids do mentoring businesses because they wanted to help other people who reminded them of themselves when they were younger. And I look at the program a lot as finding kids who are passionate about entrepreneurship and using that passion to kind of encourage them, show them opportunity, and then get them excited about their future.
That's awesome. And one of the things I'm very, very curious about, would you recommend all entrepreneurs, no matter what situation, they give back? Or do you think there's a time and place when you should give back? Or do you think this is just someone's DNA? Like some people maybe aren't meant to give back.
I think you have to be able to give back. Sometimes your business might be at a stage where you can't give back. It's not realistic. And if you try, you'll do a bad job. And that's not the right time to give back. But once you realize that you have the time, I think it's great. But people have to want to do it, so it shouldn't be something that's forced.
Totally.
People should find their passion. So, everyone's got something that they're interested in helping. And I'll tell you, for me and for everyone that I've talked to who's been involved with community service, it's such a good balance to the stress of running a business. It just helps ground you in what's important and what matters. And this isn't a reason to do it, but I found that I've met amazing business contacts through the community service, not expecting that to be the case. But there's just a ton of amazing people who are giving back.
It's always interests me how some of the best contacts ever made, entrepreneurial-wise, comes from the places you're not looking for contacts. Like for example, one of our largest contracts to date, I met at the gym because he asked me to spot him, like on a bench press, right? Like or another one is a personal friend of mine I made for the elevator in my apartment building one day, right? Like, it's amazing. I think part of it is being opportunistic as an entrepreneur and recognizing those opportunities too when you least expect them. But that's awesome what you're talking about giving back, and I agree with 100%. I think it is a part of my DNA to an extent, and I don't know. It's just the most humbling feeling, and I also think one of the things I've realized is you need to learn what's the right type of giving back to your type of DNA, because for some people it might be better for them just to donate money versus other people hands-on, and what type of programs or things should you be invested in. Right. So like Big Brothers Big Sisters entrepreneurial program made absolute perfect sense for me because literally my little's at the same age when I started Chop Talk. Right. So there's a lot of relatable characteristics there where I can give him that type of feedback because I went through the same exact things he's going through now versus, someone else who maybe has a different type of path, which is okay. Find a right fit in that type of regard. So I definitely think it all goes there. I honestly don't talk about that enough, and I think I should. I feel as an entrepreneurial committee, talking about giving back more and being more open about it is a huge, 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 huge thing to spread awareness. The same way as talking more about Philly, about how amazing of a city this is, the same thing, spread more awareness about the subject matter.
And I agree with you completely. And something you said, donating money is as important as volunteering because every program has to fund the staff. And there's never enough money for the amount of need out there. And if someone doesn't have a lot of time, they could also find one-day projects, right? Go and if you want to clean up a park, go to a shelter and work in the food line and feed people. There's lots of things that can be done.
So before we wrap this up, my big question for you, the biggest question probably in the show here is, how can people reach you? How can they learn more about you? How can they be involved, contact you, etc.?
So you can Google me online. I do have a blog, bradaronson.com, and there's a contact button if you email me through that. I will respond to all emails. I get a ton of emails, so it might take a little while, but I will respond to you. If you don't hear back in a couple weeks, just try again. It may have gotten.
By the way, I saw something brilliant. If this might be an idea, you set up an autoresponder, no matter what. Be like, I got your email. I will get back to you. Give me time. But it was brilliant to me because now instead of people, because how many people probably follow up with you before you respond back? Like, did you get my email?
I love that idea.
Right? You just set an auto forwarder right away. Like, got your email. It takes me a while to get back to you. Stay tight. Sending multiple emails is not going to accomplish anything. Like, of course, do it a little bit more gentle, but it's a great hack, right? It's just like a great way to set expectations. Right,
because everyone wants to know, did it actually get to the person?
Exactly. And people now have email trackers, so they might see you open it, but you didn't respond because you're busy. You know, it's letting people know you're not like giving them the middle finger. They're like, hey, I'm a busy person. Give me some time.
Right.
So food for thought. But anyways, continue. I didn't mean to cut you off. Just a little hack for you, something that you might be considering.
I'm doing it. Thank you.
No problem.
Email's the best way for me. So that's what I'd suggest.
Awesome. And we'll include all that in the show notes. So this way it's very easy for people to reach you. So cool, man. Anything you want to add to the audience before we let you go? Any lasting thoughts, feedback, questions?
Well, I'd say first off, thank you again for having me. This was fun. This was like a fun conversation.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's not meant to be miserable. This is people come to podcasts like, oh, this. Yeah, people are coming like, oh no, I have to do this. What's I obligate myself? No, but yeah, no, it's meant to be fun.
And congratulations on your guys' success, man. I love that you're growing Chop Dog, and there's so much good opportunity there.
It's we're humbled, man. I'm telling you, I don't think any of us on our team ever dreamed we'd be at this point, let alone where we're going. So I think you probably get this more than most, which is you ever have it like at the days where you're in your head like, oh my God, we're going to be here, not if we get there, but you could see the trajectory happening. You know, we're kind of at that point right now. So it's ridiculous, and that it's a good ridiculous, and why we do things like this too. The amount of content we can put out there to help others too, and see how many people we can bring with us on the ladder success. I really think too many companies don't focus on that. And if you can help multiple people become successful with you, again, it's building that brand awareness. It's building that as an asset. It's helping more and more people.
And this is a way of giving back.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It 100% is. And think about it. What we do is we'll take the show. Maybe there's a topic in particular that was awesome. We'll take that, go into more detail on a blog post, take that blog post, put it on social media, take that social media, target advertise it to someone who might need it more. And it kind of builds this like repeating cycle of content. So it keeps, and every different medium, like some people want to watch a video, have the video format of this. People are listening to this on their car rides to work, are listening to this on the podcast app. Those who like to read, it'll be on the blog, right? People who are on social media might get a quick snippet summary of it, right? But it's also being created native for all the platforms. And since you come from marketing, I think someone like you understand that more than most. Like you also have to understand what is the type of way to communicate that to the type of environments that people are on so they can comprehend it and digest the content. Like here's a great example. I very rarely read books. I read yours because you're a friend, but 90% of the books that I read, I don't read. I use an audiobook and put it on 3x the speed and get it real quick into me. Like I'll go through, I have an Audible subscription. I'll listen to like 2 books a week just because I'll go on like, and that to me, audio format's a lot, just to me is my way of absorbing content. But, you know, it's also learning that people natively will digest content different ways. Like some people are better at listening. Some people are better at reading. Some people are better at like recognizing, watching. So it's also understanding and building platforms and ways for people to digest content through that type of manner.
This is brilliant. I mean, your podcast is brilliant because you can talk to, you know, your friends like me, which is fun.
Brilliant because the guests we have are brilliant. We've been lucky so far. We've had some really, really interesting people, yourself included, on the show, and it's been really fun to get to know you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. It's good to get to know you, and I think this is just a great opportunity for the business. And also, thanks, a shout out to all the people who are putting comments on. Sorry I couldn't respond to most of them. As I was talking, I just saw them flying by, but appreciate the listeners.
And just wait, man. This goes on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, YouTube later. So a lot of content that gets recycled later on. Seriously, Brad, this was awesome. We're going to have to set up that time soon. So Lee, Todd, me, you, and Kevin, for all of us to go grab dinner somewhere. Maybe we'll just all go to Frankfurt Hall, see what happens if everyone drinks out of a boot. What would happen at that conversation?
And we'd all use Uber and get home safely.
Yeah, I actually live walking distance, man, so I'm good.
And maybe as a shout out to anyone out there who's interested in being an entrepreneur but isn't doing it yet, it's never the right time. You know, it's never the right time to leave your job. It's never the right time to start your business, which is why right now is the right time to find a way to get started.
And it's never a right time to end the podcast, but I think this might be the time to do it.
Cool.
So with that, thank you, Brad.
Thank you,
Eddie. Dan, thanks for being on earlier. Thanks for everyone listening. Again, this is podcast, I believe, episode 11, brought to you by chopdog.com. Dog is in D-A-W-G. Stop laughing at it. D-A-W-G.
You know what we should do is when we do the audio edit, just like if it's wrong, insert you saying it in a completely different tone. It's like, this is episode 12 of the podcast.
You know what?